Welcome, everybody. It is so good to have you here at eTour. There were lots of places you could have been today on a beautiful Saturday morning. So we're going to try to make this as helpful and exciting as we possibly can. And it's great to be here at St. Paul Church. Rick is a great pastor, and they helped us tremendously in getting in. And I don't know if you realize how advanced this church is, but I was in the men's room out here before. And on the wall is one of those real fancy new air-blown hand dryers. And I went over to use it, and there's a little sticker on it. It says, "For a 30-second message from our pastor, push here." Now that's a unique idea. That's a unique idea. Did he leave? I didn't get a chance to. Oh, dear. No, it is good to be together today. I started in this position as the Director of Connectional Ministries about 4 years ago now, my fourth year. And after 32 years in the parish, getting excited about church life in general in a variety of kinds of settings of churches, from small ones to large ones. When this position opened, I was really excited about the opportunity to take some of the things that I and others have learned and to build a strong relationship with the general church in terms of all of the resources that they offer us as well. I kind of took the position as a fluke, to be honest with you. I applied. I thought there's no way ever going to happen. We were settled about as much as Abraham and Sarah ever could be in our cozy little church where I was serving. And, well, I have to tell you what happened. Here it is in a nutshell. Like I say, my wife and I were quite comfortable where we were. But the congregation said, "We really need to grow and we need young people." Did you ever hear that in your church? Well, I came up with this brilliant brainstorm idea. So I got up in the pulpit on a Sunday morning and I said, "Folks, we need to grow. We need more young people. And the best way to do it is everybody go home and have a baby." Now, my kids the youngest one at that time was 17 years old. And so we figured we had done our thing. I had also been sitting in my office kind of worrying about what the empty nest was going to feel like when the last one moved out. And I one day said, "God, what am I going to do with an empty nest?" So I preached that and everybody laughed just like you did. And on Tuesday, I got a call from the parsonage, "Please come home quickly." I thought, oh my heavens, what happened? I go in, my wife is standing up we had a split level parsonage, and she was up on the upper level at the top of the steps. And I said, "What's the matter, Bonnie?" And she said, "Well, look." And she picks up what I thought was a digital thermometer. It was also the year of the Halley-Bopp comet, interestingly enough. And we discovered that God had a very wry sense of humor. And after 17 years of not having a child, our boy Wesley came along. And we were quite pleased for that. But it's one of those moments in your life when you realize, wow, God's got a plan. And sometimes we just have to be open to the plan. And that's a lot about what we're going to be talking about today, is our journey of faith. I also tell you one other story. I was in the job for about a week or two, and the phone rang. I think it was the first or second phone call I received. I was just happy to talk to anybody by that time. I didn't know very many people at the time. And a woman was on the phone, and I said hello, and I told them who I was. And the lady gave me her name, and I couldn't remember what it was, but she said to me, "What exactly is your role?" I said, "I am the Director of Connectional Ministries." She paused for a second, and then she said, "Oh, wow. I just think you people who work with the prison population do a marvelous job." It's connectional, not correctional. And one of the wonderful things we have as United Methodists is we are connected. We're connected in a lot of different ways, all of which help us do some things that we couldn't do ourselves, but also gives us just an unbelievable amount of resource out there. In every one of our local churches, there's gifted people who can do all kinds of things. And it gets really exciting when we can match people's gifts with opportunities for ministry. So that's also a lot about what we're going to talk about today, is getting people excited about that. Let me start by telling you how we came up with the name eTour. We actually started this back, we started talking about it in 2009. In 2010, we decided that one of the major shifts of the Susquehanna Conference was going to be, when it formed in June of 2010, that we were going to see ourselves, those of us on staff, would see ourselves as persons who would go out and share resources with local churches. I know a lot of times when people think of the conference, they think of a few folks sitting around in a very plush office somewhere making decisions, especially about how you should spend your money and how we can get more money off you than we get last year. That's not how it works, folks. We all know that one of the gifts is our annual conference that meets once a year. And at that annual conference, each one of your pastors and your lay member, and possibly a youth or possibly more than one lay member, depending on the size of your congregation, we all gather together at Messiah College, and we talk about the years before, and we talk about the future, and we discern God's will for the present, and we begin to make some decisions about that. When that conference is over, the cabinet, the staff, and everyone else begins to work on how do we best do what you've asked us to do. And we've discovered some amazing things, and I'll share that with you in a little bit. But that's how this all got started. We thought, how can we do this in a new and exciting way? How can we get the resources to the folks so they all know what we have to offer, what we can do? And if we don't know how to do it, we can at least link you with someone who does. So that's what this is all about. So we decided in 2010 we'd take our show on the road. And I thought, boy, wouldn't it be great? We'll get T-shirts made up like a band tour, you know? And on the front it could say eTour 2010 and 2012, and on the back it could list all the churches we were going to be at for the next. Well, it didn't quite work out that way because we didn't have all our, later churches in any way. So we ditched the T-shirt thing. Very disappointing. Next round, I think we'll go with the T-shirts. In fact, we passed Toby Keith's tractor trailer today on the way to a concert. And, the dates are there. There's no reason we can't do this. We'll talk about it later. As we thought about it, we discovered as an annual conference that, as Tim told us before, the mission of the annual conference is quite different than the mission of a local church. You make disciples. We resource you to empower you to do the same thing. In fact, we also equip you to do the same thing. And so we thought about the word equip. Whatever we do, we have to be about equipping you to have the gifts and resources for ministry to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. We also thought that these two words were important: empower and engage. Because part of our call is to produce, to raise up transformational spiritual leaders, both clergy and lay. No one else can do that. You're busy making disciples. Somebody has to help with the rest of it. And so we go about that task for you. And finally, as Bishop Middleton is always talking about, it's time for us to get out of our churches and begin to engage this community that is changing quickly around us. And so we need some ways that we can help you engage with the community around. And then we realized that we didn't have a fourth word for connect. Nobody could think of anything that started with an E. So we went with connect and jotted it down on a piece of paper. And all of a sudden we said, holy mackerel, that thing forms the letter E if you do it like that. So that's where eTour comes from. Everybody thinks it's like email or electronic. Well, it kind of builds off that. But we're here today to help equip, empower, engage, and most of all, to connect us together. You know, the United Methodist Church is really one church. It's one church. What we have is a whole lot of storefronts all over the place. You know, Starbucks would kill to have some of the locations we have, folks. But what we have to do is begin to engage the community and use the connection that we have to empower those. Every one of those storefronts has a unique opportunity for ministry. We're going to talk about that in some of the classes today. What could be your niche in terms of ministry? So we're here and we're excited about this. We're going to continue this. You're the next to the last stop on the tour this year. We're going back to the Wilkes-Barre and Scranton districts at the end of the month. They've asked us to come back. This thing has caught on like wildfire. We started off with groups of about 20 people coming out, and there's 10 presenters, so that wasn't too great. But as time goes on and word got around, and superintendents helped us an awful lot to spread the word, look at the turnout today. And last weekend we had similar crowds in State College and Altoona. So we're excited about this. Bishop Middleton can't be with us today, but she's been gracious enough to send her greetings. And she would be here if she could, but she's got some other business to attend to today. And so we think about her and the tremendous responsibility and task that she has as our primary spiritual leader of the conference. Let's change the focus a little bit to talk about who we are and why we're here. When I think about the biblical story, one of the things that occurs to me is the importance of the word journey. Journey. In fact, throughout the scriptures, over and over again, is told the story of a people of God on a journey. Most of the time, it's a journey of faith. Maybe that's a really good description for who we are in our day, too. A people of God on a journey of faith. Think back. Even the very first book of the Bible, Genesis. In the beginning, we have the creation story, and God creates Adam and Eve, and the garden is set in, as their setting for life. They mess it up. Sin comes into the world. And they go off on a journey. God comes looking for them. They're not there. First off, they're hiding. And then they're asked to leave the garden. And they're out on a journey. But from that moment on, in Genesis till the end of the book of Revelation, what we have is the story of a God who will not let God's people go. And spends the rest of the story seeking to have a deeper and more intimate relationship with all of his people. And so we have story after story about this. Story after story of people called by God on a journey of faith. Let me share some of them with you. Just think about this as we get started today. I've already mentioned my experience with the story of Abraham and Sarah, and I can tell you most unequivocally that I know what it was like when Sarah found out her news about their child at the age of 80 and began to laugh. But Abraham and Sarah somehow were able to muster up the faith to go on a journey where God was sending them. They didn't know where they were going. They didn't have any direction whatsoever other than that God said, I'm going to show you a land that someday will be yours, and you will be the parents of a great nation, and I will show you the way. And they pulled up the roots. Imagine that at their age. Just pulling up roots, going on a journey of faith, the people of God on a journey of faith. To where, we're not really sure, but they knew that God was going to be with them. Oh, and there's other people as well. We think about Noah. Noah and his family, you know that story so well. Noah kind of minding his own business until one day God gives him a little construction project to do. And, Noah could have said no. Noah could have said, I can't be hearing what I'm hearing. This doesn't make any sense. We're sitting here in the middle of an arid land, and I'm supposed to build a boat and put animals on it and save humanity? God says, Noah, I want you to do it. And again, by faith, Noah does it. Puts his family in there. And again, we have a small gathering of people on a journey of faith to a place, who knows where they were going to end up. But they did it. A people of faith on a journey with God. Oh, and it doesn't end there. We've got stories like familiar stories of Moses, Miriam, Aaron. Moses, you know his background. He was kind of hiding from his first career and out tending sheep when he saw the burning bush that really got his attention. And God begins to call from him to the bush and says, Moses, I have a task for you. I want you to go and set my people free. Go into Egypt, tell old Pharaoh, let my people go. And like most of us, Moses starts to argue back with God and says, I'm not your man. Who's going to listen to me? They won't listen to me. Then he says, I can't speak well. I'm not a good speaker. I never took lay speaking school. Not even the basic course. Nothing. And God says, well, take your brother Aaron. He's always talking. He can handle it for you. And excuse after excuse is taken away until finally Moses goes on that task. And he leads his people, God's people, on a journey of faith out of Egypt to a land they had no idea where they were going. What a wonderful story of faith. And there are others as well. We can think about people who challenged the status quo of the day. People like Ruth and Naomi, who went across ethnic boundaries to experience love, to experience what it meant to really be God's people on a journey, a lifelong journey of faith. A marvelous story. One of my favorites and one of yours is the story of Jesus and the disciples. Now, with the way things are going with new music in the church, that could be a new rock and roll band, but it's not. Jesus and the disciples. Remember, the entire story of Jesus calling people into ministry took place with people coming to him, and out of faith they said yes to a journey that they had no idea what was in front of them. They didn't know where they were going. They didn't know what would happen. And something inside said, God wants me on this journey of faith. And they were able to do it. And what a journey it was, huh? The Apostle Paul, all of us grew up in the church, all who grew up in the church go, remember all of the journeys of Paul, so many of them were difficult journeys. Many a time, he went somewhere to preach and got run out of town for what he had to say. Wasn't an easy thing for Paul. Paul had a lot of barriers to conquer, and yet by faith, he was able to hang in there and to lead many congregations of people on a journey of faith sent by God. And then that new Christian rock band, John Wesley and the Reformers. Well, no, they weren't a rock band or a Christian band. This is where the story gets really important for us in our day. You remember the story of Wesley's experiences as well. John Wesley, along with people like Martin Luther, John Calvin, Zwingli, and the list goes on and on throughout the Reformers. All of them looked at the church and they said, something just doesn't seem right. What started out as a movement so long ago, all of a sudden has become stagnant. What started out as a dynamic movement of the Spirit has turned into an institution. So John Wesley, looking at the community of the city around him, decided he needed to be where the people were, working, with the folks who were working in the coal mines of the day, with the poor, with those who were working hard labor, perhaps even were homeless. And John goes to the powers that be in the Anglican Church, particularly that congregation, and he says, I really feel God's call to go down and to preach to these folk. And the church said, oh no, John, you're pastor of a very, very fine, reputable church. And look, I mean, let's face it, there's a sign out front. You ever hear this in any church that you went? There's a sign out front that says when our worship services are, and people know that we're a friendly church, so the doors are always open. If those folks want to come, they're more than welcome. But you're not going down there. And John said, I think I need to go down there. And they said, John, if you do that, you will not be in this pulpit again. And shortly after, John was there, preaching to the coal miners and to the laborers and to the poor. And a movement was begun again. We call that the Reformation. We know what the movement was all about, and we're a part of that way back in our histories. But here comes the really neat part of it all, folks. In many, many ways, we have discovered the same thing is happening to our church today, haven't we? What began as a movement with John Wesley and the Reformers has again stalled. And we've gotten comfortable as an institution. We didn't mean to do that. In fact, for a long time, that worked really, really well for us. But all of a sudden, all of us gathered here find ourselves with the opportunity to reform the church, to move out from inside the building to a new mission field that's not only halfway around the world, but literally is right around our doors. So many of our churches no longer know the community in which they sit. The community that once built the church now has spread out to the suburbs or into the city or wherever folks have gone, and other folks have moved into our communities, and we've lost touch. And we might be tempted to say there's a sign out front and the doors are open and we're a friendly church, but that's not going to cut it anymore. And we've got to get out of this institutional mode and begin a movement of God's people again. And here's the most exciting thing of all the people in the world that God could have called to this time and this place and this responsibility, and in our case, in this Chambersburg district, God chose you. That's why you're here today. God chose you to take on this responsibility of reforming the church. Isn't that a marvelous thought? That of all the people in the world, God called us. Now, sometimes I want to be like Moses and say, oh, come on. If I'm all God has, we're in trouble. No. God knows what God is doing. And God knows the gifts you have for leadership. And God is calling to you saying, will you help me reform my church for the 21st century? So that 50 years, 100 years from now, somebody will say, thank God for those people who were called by God on a journey of faith, not knowing where they were going, but they did it, and they went, and they made it. eTour 2010, 2012. We've been at this for 2 years. We've been going to local churches, into local communities and districts to share resources that are available for you. Again, we're talking about this grand connection we have. We're talking about equipping people and local churches for the task of doing ministry. We're talking about empowering, and we're talking about engaging, getting beyond ourselves. Because we, again, realized as the new conference that our task is that of, and say it again one more time with vim and vigor, making disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. That's what we're about. The number one thing that we're responsible to do is to go and make disciples of Jesus Christ. Here's a reminder why the conference is different than the district or the local church. Number one, we really have three responsibilities as an annual conference. Number one is we train and deploy quality transformational leadership, clergy and lay, to lead the disciple-making process in local churches. No one else can deploy clergy other than the annual conference, the bishop and the cabinet. Okay? That's a unique job. But they also have the job of raising up and training transformational lay leadership. You know, here's what happened. Some of us realized that as the church needs to change from institution to movement, that most of us, in my age bracket anyway, went to seminary at a time where they taught us how to manage the institution first, but we weren't taught on how to help people move along the spiritual journey. We're retooling and we're relearning, and seminaries are shifting. We've got a ways to go. Secondly, the annual conference's task is to resource our local churches with effective tools and best practices for effective disciple making in the 21st century. It says that in the Book of Discipline. I added the next lines, but don't tell anybody. Because I like this idea about the reformation, the Reformation. So we want to do effective disciple making in the 21st century and for the reformation of the church. And thirdly, we are to provide a covenantal connection for ministry, mission and ministry beyond the local church. When the vision team drafted this initially back in 2010, the word covenantal was added to that line, and got a little bit of heat from that and some emails and things where people said, since when were we in a covenant? That's what the connection is. And in a day when no one seems to care about any covenant, we have the opportunity to model for the world what it means to be supportive of one another. That how we share our resources together, we are better than any one of us could be individually. And this is a covenant with God and with each other. There are currently 11 districts in this Susquehanna Conference. Somewhere, when we started, there were 934 churches. That's changed a little bit. A few have ceased and one or two may have begun. When we started the Susquehanna Conference, we had 666 clergy. No one liked the number 666 for some reason. So we've asked a few people to retire early. And that number is now somewhere around, probably even a little lower than that at this point. And about almost 170,000 strong, folks. Look at the area we cover. Imagine the impact if the church engaged the community and took seriously both our social responsibility for justice along with the spiritual responsibility to make disciples. What an impact we can have. What's new about the conference? Well, we're learning to rethink church. We've been talking about that for 2 years at annual conference sessions and through the link and the quick link and other places. And I hope that all of you are beginning to rethink how do we be the church for the 21st century. We know that exponential change is everywhere. In fact, if you brought a cell phone on your way to work, on your way to this workshop today, it's probably already on the endangered species list. We know that we have a new mission field, and that mission field is right around our churches. Right around our churches. And the need for transformational clergy and lay leadership with things like the pastoral leader development groups that are now meeting across the conference, with other training that's offered through days like this, and lay speaking school and leadership university. We're trying our best to change the focus from management kind of things to how do we be spiritual and transformational leaders. And lastly, we're learning to rethink conference. There isn't a day that goes by that we don't meet as a staff and ask ourselves, What are we doing today to resource our local churches? What are we doing differently now than what we used to do before? And what should we be about? Because we have to think about that all the time too, as the world changes around us. But more than that, we're rethinking it and looking at the big pictures, questions about, what is an annual conference? What is our role? How do we best do this? Where will we be in 10 years? Should we be planning new churches in some areas? Should we be thinking about realigning resources around certain ideas or concepts or missions? It's an exciting time, folks. And I'm thankful that God chose us to be the ones who are called to do it. When you leave today, one of the ways we get you to stay till the very last minute is to hand out some freebies. And you're going to get some great freebies today. One of them is a poster that's rolled up like this, and they're over by this door. So we're asking everybody today at 3 o'clock, we're at 2:55, we'll gather back in here, and then we'll have 2 minutes of closing. Very, very brief. We'll ask you to do an evaluation, because that's how we learn, to do it better so that the next time we offer an e-tour, you're even more excited than you will be today. These will be handed out by that door. And I would encourage you all to put this poster up somewhere in one of the major meeting rooms in your church. It asks the question, how do the ministries, or those we're planning to do in the church, how do our ministries help us make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world? Because we're busy folk. And if all the things we're doing don't help us focus upon the mission of the church, we're going to have a hard time getting there. We need to refocus our energies. So take this and give that some thought. Also, when you leave today, our communications folk have put together a marvelous DVD CD-ROM. It's got both video on it and also some printable resources. Almost every presenter today has some things on here that you can use. It's just chock full of goodies. So please don't miss that when you leave today. And anyone missing or leaving before 1 o'clock today will miss the steak dinner at Haas's on your own. You pay for it. Okay. We're really working at this whole concept of aligning our resources, equipping, empowering, engaging, connecting, all to be a resource to you. That is why Connectional Ministries exists. That is why our staff exists. We are here by your gracious giving of ministry shares, which enables us to give back to you and tools that you can use, then in turn to go and make disciples of Jesus Christ. Folks, this is just really the beginning of our day today, and the beginning of what I believe, and others too, is the reformation of the United Methodist Church and the Christian Church for the 21st century. So now you have to read this. It says, for those of you who maybe can't read it in the back, it is Moses standing there, of course, and he says, anyway, that's the big picture. For the details, I'll turn it over to my staff. Listen, I take laughs however I can get them. Okay. And that's what we're going to do now. I'm going to call upon our staff to stand up, and we'll tell you a little bit about what they're going to be talking about today. On your name tag are the workshops that you've signed up for today. Okay. First of all, of course, your district superintendent is going to lead a session on what it means to be the SPRC committee or PPR committee, depending what you happen to have in your... And that's going to take place the full morning. We'll tell you where those rooms are in just a minute. One of the staff will do that for us. But we're thankful for that. I'll be in this sanctuary area leading 2 sessions today, and they're offered twice. The first one will be on demographics. I rather the title, Who Are the People in My Neighborhood? Like the Sesame Street song. We're going to learn about who it is that is around our church and give you a full packet of demographic information about your community that you'll be able to go back and will really help you plan ministry for the future. The second one I'll be doing is called Developing a Discipling System for Your Church, and we'll be looking at how how local churches can align their resources and focus on the primary task of making disciples, and what might be missing and what might be missing in our church life, and what we might be missing in our life together. So those will both be in this room later today. I don't have my sheet, so I'm going to just look around and catch people. All the way over to my left is Gary Smith. He is going to talk to you about the finances of the annual conference, and he is well versed to do that because he is our comptroller treasurer. And Gary will bring some light to the great mysteries of the ministry shares. In front of him is Lisa Bender. Lisa is my executive secretary of Connectional Ministries and my administrative assistant. She has put almost all of this together in terms of the logistics. We want to thank her immensely for all that work. And if that's not good enough, folks, if that's not good enough, she's going to tell you where there's money available for grants to do ministry. Now, that's a pretty good workshop. So if you're signed up for Lisa's workshop, that's what she's going to be doing today. Over here, we have Jerry Walgamuth. Jerry is our director of communications, and he and his staff are responsible for such things as the printed link that many of you read. How many of you get the Link newspaper? Everybody in this room really ought to keep in contact with what's happening. And also, how many of you get the quick link email blast? Oh, all right. We're going to pass some sheets around in all the classes you're in today. Please give us your email address. You don't want to miss quick link, because quick link tells you all the important things that happen when they happen. We don't overburden you with it, but we do send it out maybe once, twice a week, sometimes even more if things happen important. But that's your link. That's your link. That's a good title. That's your way of keeping in contact with what's going on. Jerry's going to lead a session on websites, church websites, and a little bit about social media. And that ought to wet some whistles about what's going on with that. In the back, we've got Dennis Keller. Dennis is the superintendent of the New Cumberland district currently, and he's going to have most of the kingdom of God shortly when we redistrict. And he'll be talking to you today about revitalization of churches, and particularly Matthew 28 and what that's all about. And we thank him for being with us today. In front of him is Jody Robinson. Jody runs Discovery Place. Can you say that, Discovery Place? Discovery Place. What we've discovered is on the evaluation forms, people say, that was a wonderful, we learned a lot about Discovery Joint or Discovery Center or Discovery Neighborhood. I mean, so it's Discovery Center, Discovery Place. I did that just to see if you were. And Jody will be sharing with you all the marvelous resources that we have available to you at no charge, other than the postage to send it back. All right, that's a pretty good deal. Next, pardon me? Oh, I'm sorry. She's also doubling in on missions. Jody has a love for missions and VIM, and she'll be talking about how local churches can get involved or increase their ministry in terms of mission work as well. Next is Rob Vischer. Some of you may have heard of a little operation going called Mission Central. And you may think you know everything about Mission Central, but he's got some really neat things to talk about, and you'll enjoy his session if you're in there as well. Plus, he has really good candy on his display, all kinds of Milky Ways and stuff. Yeah, see, he gets that kind of stuff. The rest of us don't have that. We have to go to Mission Central to get it. Next to him is Ann Horton. Ann Horton is our Director of Camping and Retreat Ministries, as well as she will be talking about that and safe sanctuaries today. And that's a hot topic again right now. We want to make sure that everybody is set with their safe sanctuary policies and with some of the changes that are out there now that we need to be aware of. Who else is hiding in the midst? Warren Bavacqua. Stand up, Warren. Warren is our Director of Young People's Ministry, and he'll be talking about two subjects today. be talking about young people's ministry in the local church. That's youth and young adult ministry, as well as talking about Christian education. And those are two big topics, important topics, and he's got a lot to share with you that's really good stuff about that as well. And be aware that if you have a heart condition or you don't like to be jolted, you may not want to go with Warren's group, because Warren loves what he does.